Hello, welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. And I'm very excited today to have two great guests, Sonney Jones from Dal-Tile Corporation and Ben Enriquez from Transplace Mexico. And we're going to talk today about collaborative shipping, transportation collaboration, and a project that Dal-Tile and Transplace work together on, along with several other partners, that won them the 2012 CSCMP Supply Chain Innovation Award. But before we dive into the conversation, I just want to, for those of you that are joining Talking Logistics for the first time, just to kind of get you acquainted with the platform here. And one of the goals that we have with Talking Logistics is really to have you, the audience, engage as part of the conversation. So you'll notice there's a submit question button here. So we invite you to ask questions throughout, and I'll keep an eye on it. I'll try to weave those conversations as best I can into the conversation, either during or after we've kind of gone through our intro here. You can also submit questions via the chat feature. So either way, I'll keep an eye on that. And if you're the type that's on Twitter or Facebook and likes to tweet during these types of events, if you'll notice up on the top there, there's the tweet function and a tweet tab and a Facebook share button. You guys can tweet and share as well. So again, thank you everyone for joining. And now, first of all, Sonney and Ben, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Adrian. Glad to be here.
Great. So Sonney, I'll start with you. And before we kind of dive into kind of the specifics of the collaborative shipping program, let's start at the very beginning and, give us a brief overview of Dal-Tile Corporation in case, there are folks attending who are not familiar with the company and your transportation operations. And then tell us, what were the key factors that led you to explore the possibility of co-loading with other shippers? What was was there a specific problem you were trying to solve or an opportunity you were trying to achieve?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Adrian. Dal-Tile is a ceramic tile manufacturer headquartered here in Dallas, Texas. We're part of Mohawk Industries, which is headquartered in Calhoun, Georgia. And all of Mohawk's operations are focused on flooring manufacture, but of many different types. As far as ceramic tile goes, here in North America, Dal-Tile has 8 manufacturing locations, 3 in Mexico and 5 in the U.S., and our domestic transportation budget is about $175 million for 2013. Our products are very dense, which is a very key component in this entire collaboration effort that we have going with Transplace. Our products actually have a density of about 65 to 75 pounds a cubic foot. So they are very dense. And as you know, when you buy transportation capacity, you're buying both weight and cube. But from an internal perspective in Dal-Tile, we're always focused on the weight capacity. And in the past, have given very little consideration to the cubic capacity because we always weigh out prior to cubing out. And I think that's really kind of what brings us to, was this an opportunity versus a problem? It really wasn't a problem. In fact, many people in the operation really doubted that there was an opportunity here because all of our trucks go out at close to maximum weight. But in fact, we saw it, or I saw it as an opportunity because I recognized that 75 pounds a cubic foot leaves a lot of cube unutilized. And no matter what type of mode you're using, whether it be container, rail, or over the road, you have a lot of unutilized cube. In fact, with just using a 53-foot trailer as a basis, we only use, for U.S. domestic loads, less than 20% of the cubic capacity. And in Mexico, where you have higher weight limits, we use about 30% of the cubic capacity. So all this really appeared wasteful to me. And using really my LTL and MDOCC background, I knew that the real solution here was in the freight mix, which we really didn't have. Internally, there was no solution that we could offer up. So we began to think about some sort of an external collaboration where we could bring in the right freight mix and thereby generate some benefits both for ourselves and for our partners.
Yeah, no, great. Great point. I think I remember seeing a picture of as part of the write-up of the case study, one of your trucks loaded, and after it weighed out, and you did, it was kind of just visually you would see kind of all that empty space within the truck.
Correct. It's quite a difference where we are today versus where we are when we started.
So let me kind of this whole topic of transportation collaboration. I mean, in all the years that I've been an analyst and working with shippers, it's always a topic that shippers are always interested in, and yet they're they either don't know how to get started, and where to start, or they're skeptical that they can actually make it work. So let me start with that first question first, that first point, in terms of where to start. I've come across some cases where shippers have actually reached out directly to each other to see if they can, work out a program together. And in other cases where they've kind of worked with a 3PL as a facilitator, which path did you take and why?
Well, I think the first thing you have to look at, depending upon your own collaborative opportunity, and they're all different. This one has to do with weight and food, but there are many other ways to collaborate. But you got to understand the appeal and the complexity of your collaborative opportunity. And, you have to ask what will or can your collaborative partner gain? Because if they can't gain anything, they're not going to have much interest. And you're back to square one with it being a private solution because there's no real benefits to collaborate with. But if there are benefits for the collaborative partner, can you and your collaborative partner support the needs of the opportunity? And they can be fairly complex, and I think we've had a fairly complex situation here, opportunity that we've tried to solve. But in terms of that question about how did you approach it, we really took both paths. We started out trying to solve the problem ourselves internally. And so I spent a number of months trying to reach out to industry partners and customs brokers and different people in the industry, to try to find these potential partners. Because we knew we were looking for someone that had very low density freight. And I just, put your thinking cap on and think about styrofoam cups, pillows, and you start going through the commodities that would meet your needs. And I didn't get anywhere. I spent several months trying to, get some traction, and my approach just didn't work very well. Because I think really it's a pretty abstract idea for most shippers as far as combining truckloads, and I just didn't get any traction. So really, no traction occurred until Transplace entered the picture as our facilitator.
Well, let me transition to you, Ben. As a 3PL, you have someone like, Sonney come to you, or a shipper that, is kind of interested in collaborating with other shippers. Where do you start, in helping a shipper kind of explore those opportunities? I mean, what process do you go through as a 3PL, to determine whether a shipper can truly benefit from collaboration?
Sure. Talking specifically about this project, I think that before starting looking for shippers, we worked with Dal-Tile on creating what was our base criteria. What type of shippers would be compatible with Dal-Tile's freight? And based on that, we created 5 basic points. The points that we were looking at, we were looking for exactly the opposite freight of Dal-Tile, meaning we were looking for light freight. That was the first one. We needed to start searching for companies that had light freight. At the same time, we needed their products to be compatible, to be able to combine in a load the tile with the other shipper's product. We needed to understand, once we had that, we needed to understand if there was some volume and route similarity. In other words, we wanted these companies to have same lanes, especially we would like them to have same origins and similar destinations with less than a couple of 100 miles away from each other on the destination side. We were also looking for low value freight, we wanted to keep the freight under the $100,000 standard cargo liability that most of the carriers have in the U.S. And well, we also had another component, which we were also. Dal-Tile has a manufacturing presence in Mexico and in the U.S. So our two initial points were to find for co-load partners were Monterrey, Mexico, and El Paso, Texas. So we wanted to make sure that the shippers that we were looking at on the Mexican side were shippers that had CTPAT certification. So once we put together the main criteria for customers that would qualify for this program, then we would start looking in different industries and verticals to see which customers could be a good match for the program.
So did you, as part of that process, Ben, did you use some, any technology or network design tools, or was it all really just kind of looking at attributes and trying to just, was it more?
Yes. As Transplace, we have presence in both sides of the border, in Mexico and the U.S. So we had a sales team in Monterrey, Mexico, that started actively looking in the Monterrey market and in El Paso market for customers that had that could be potential prospects. We have different industries. Again, we were looking for consumer goods. We were looking also at appliances. We were looking at different industries to see which industry could have shippers in the area that could match this. We have different tools. We have different technology to look for these shippers in both sides. So I think our sales team did a great job looking for these opportunities in both sides of the border.
Great. Sonney, let me, and Ben already touched upon, some of these things, but when you look at, the attributes of an ideal, collaboration partners, I mean, what was some of the, factors that you were looking at? In other words, you ended up, as part of the project, you partnered up with Whirlpool, Convermex, and Werner Ladder. I mean, what made these partners, these companies good partners for you? And is there, one attribute that you've learned that is kind of more important than the rest?
Is that for me, Adrian, or for Ben?
That was for you, Sonney.
Okay, all right. Ben probably touched, I couldn't hear Ben's response earlier, but I suspect he touched on some of these key factors that we've come up with. Obviously, the first one's the freight density. We have this extreme density. We're looking for partners on the opposite end of the density spectrum, and in fact, really target products that are 5 pounds a cubic foot or less. But there are 3 or 4 others, and I suspect Ben touched on those. But density is the most important, and of course lanes. We need to have similar origin and destinations to really pair up well. But apart from those tangible key factors, I think there are some intangibles that are very important as well. And really, one of them is just basically attitude. You've got to be willing to plow new ground because in a lot of cases, this kind of thing it's very out of the box for many people. And in fact, internally, it was very out of the box. So it wasn't something that Dal-Tile was very comfortable with from the very beginning. There was a certain level of uncomfortableness from internally. So you got to be willing to plow new ground. You got to be willing to blaze a trail, so to speak. And in doing that, you've got to be able to accept that you got to put some skin in the game if you're going to derive any benefits. And that's really what collaboration is. If you're not willing to get involved, and if you just want a solution, well then there are a number of people in the industry that are going to give you a solution. It might not necessarily be a collaborative solution, but they'll give you a solution. What Transplace has done here is they have been able to hook us up with other partners, and I'm sure these other partners are just as appreciative of that facilitation as I am. But that's really what's made the difference here for this project. And without, I'd have to say, without Transplace's efforts relative to facilitation, I don't know what we'd do with this today. can tell you, I don't think we'd be very far wrong with it.
Yeah, no, good points. I think that last point you made there, I think is part of the reason why a lot of companies end up ultimately working with a 3PL partner to kind of serve as that neutral facilitator that helps with the the engineering of the solution and helps bring all the parties together to do that. So I'm always biased towards having the 3PL kind of or any other third party really serve as kind of a facilitator in all this. Before I get to my next question, I just want to remind all the folks attending, if you are signed up as a guest and you want to ask a question, I think it's going to ask you to sign up. But just want to remind you that if you do have a question and you are a guest, go ahead and just enter your email or whatever the information is that they're asking. And as we go along here, submit your questions either via the chat feature or the Ask a Question button. And Sonney, you just kind of touched upon this a little bit. I'll let either you or Ben take the lead on this one. But it's the point that I brought up earlier about what I hear from a lot of shippers that are interested in collaboration, which is this, many of them are skeptical that they could actually, make collaboration work. And, the way I sum it up is, collaboration all sounds great, until you have to actually, when you talk about it, until you have to sit down and talk about how you're actually going to, work together and share the risks and rewards and, and how you're going to actually put the collaboration into practice. Questions just like, what if, my load is ready and your load is not and the truck has to leave, half empty, how are costs and savings, calculated and allocated, who owns the carrier contract, who is liable if damage occurs, and so on and so forth. So, I assume these kind of questions came up as you were having discussions with your partners. How did you address these questions and issues and overcome them in order to get buy-in from all the partners?
Okay. The point that's the common denominator there is all about risk, because in anything that you're not familiar with, you have to assess the risk. And there have been some difficulties in each one of these partnerships where we've gotten a little out of sync with one another, or we had something that wasn't coordinated quite like it should have been, but we've learned from that. And we certainly didn't have all the answers when we first started with Whirlpool as the first collaborative opportunity. And we had to work through these topics to really develop I call it a model to follow as we've gone forward. But one of the things that we have noticed and have really focused on is the need for transparency throughout the building of the relationship and the designing of the solutions. We've had to have a lot of transparency. So our approach definitely is to have an open book toward operations and cost modeling, with Transplace doing the facilitation of that. And I think by doing so, it provides a lot of confidence when you get to the end result, where you have a solution that you've agreed upon and you want to try or implement. Everyone has a much higher level of confidence that it's going to work and that their concerns have been heard or they've been listened to, because it has been a joint effort. We always start with this introduction by Transplace relative to who the partners are going to be, which quickly moves into a non-disclosure agreement, and then we get down to the nitty-gritty of really trying to jointly design operations for a collaborative operation. So there's a number of steps that we've defined that we go through, and we've been pretty careful not to try to jump to the solution too quickly and to give it its due as far as the design and the development of the process, because if you don't do that, you really don't get to know your collaborative partner and really what their needs and concerns are. So again, going back to your initial thing about this risk, how does anyone know that these issues with risk are being dealt with unless you take it slowly and you work together so that you can understand what their concerns are? And that's kind of the approach that we take.
Great, Ben. Do you have anything to add to that in terms of the kind of the success factors that you've seen in terms of getting buy-in from the partners and overcoming some of these questions and issues that sometimes come up in terms of when it comes time to put the when the rubber hits the road, if you will, in terms of getting this into practice?
Sure. I think the most important factor, just like Sonney mentioned, is that people is open to listen and learn about the program. I think that we faced a lot of challenges, a lot of when we started, it took us almost a year to get the program together and get our first loads going, and we talked to probably 10 companies at the beginning that we wanted to partner up with, and not all of them were receptive to the concept. And I can tell you that the ones that were receptive, that wanted to understand, that wanted to run test loads, diagrams, cost models, that invested the time, are the ones that today are paying off with some good stuff, such as savings in their freight, because now you are pretty much mixing two products in one trailer, so you're freeing up capacity, you're saving monies, you are giving something back to the industry, because you're also reducing the amount of trucks being utilized. So I think the program has had its own challenges, but as it was built and people was open to listen to it, now it pays off. So I think that would be my comment.
Great. What I heard from both you and Sonney. I mean, Sonney mentioned earlier, really, the importance going in is having the right mindset and being open to doing this, and then obviously moving forward is really continuing to have transparency, which I think sounds to be an important factor here. Since you and Sonney can't hear each other, I'm gonna start with Sonney now, and have Sonney answer first, and then Ben, you can answer the remaining questions, so that we don't get tripped up on who's going to answer which question. So, Sonney, I'll address this question to you. It's obvious that setting up a collaboration project, as Ben mentioned, it took almost a year to get it going. Finding the partners, everything else. It's challenging enough. Yet you guys kind of added yet another dimension by moving co-loaded shipments across borders, specifically from Mexico to the U.S. What additional challenges did this present, and how did you overcome them?
There was a huge barrier here for us as we got started with the cross-border portion of this, and I didn't realize how large of a barrier it would be. But as it turned out, Transplace was able to put quite a few resources forth to be able to develop a solution relative to having two different shippers' products on the same trailer at crossing. And Transplace worked that out with both Mexican and U.S. Customs, so that we had a solid solution relative to the cross-border portion of it. There was always the thought that if we didn't get a solution relative to the cross-border part, we could always work from Laredo after the products had crossed. But our real objective was to be able to do it from origin in Mexico, regardless of where that origin point might be. And honestly, the work that Transplace did on this enabled us to do that. We now have opened a new plant in central Mexico, and we'll have shipments coming to the U.S. from that plant as well at some point in 2013. So it really was very important to have accomplished what Transplace accomplished with this customs process.
Great. Anything to add to that, Ben?
Going back to your question about what was one of the biggest challenges that we had on cross-border shipments, I think one of our initial challenges that we had was customs. As you know, there is customs on the Mexican side, there's Mexican customs, and you have also customs on the U.S. side. So one of our first goals was to create a process that we could present to customs in both sides of the border, in which we show them, okay, we have two shippers that are going to be consolidating freight, and and it may be a normal practice in ports and maybe on the air freight side, but in this specific case, running Mexico to the U.S., usually food truckloads are run by one shipper. So we had to present our case to CBP and Mexican Customs, and that's something that we had to set meetings with both authorities in both countries. And after a few meetings, they understood what we were trying to accomplish, and they gave us the green light. And they gave us the green light and to clear by different modes such as truck, rail, and boxcar. So I think that was one of our main challenges. At the same time, we needed to have coordination in both sides of the border. In this specific case, Monterrey, Mexico is Dal-Tile's primarily point of origin. So we needed to, as we were identifying on the U.S. side what were the final destinations, we needed to contact both the U.S. plant in Mexico and the origin destination of both Dal-Tile's and the other shipper to work on processes for offloading the freight, and all that takes time. So it's just a matter of putting processes in place. But those were, I would say, our initial challenges. And once we learned, now we have multiple models that we can replicate and we can adjust depending on the shipper.
Right. Yeah, I know. When I was kind of reading the case, I thought that was an interesting aspect of it in terms of, particularly when moving goods across borders, where really it was beyond kind of your relationship with the shippers. It was also bringing customs on board and kind of educating them on terms of what you were doing and kind of putting in place the right steps from a paperwork standpoint, from an education standpoint, to make sure that things were going to be green lighted, if you will, through customs. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of this. Well, let's talk about results now. And Sonney, I'll ask you. And I think now we know that there's a little bit of a delay here, so we'll be patient for you to be able to hear the question. But tell us a little bit about what the results to date have been, and were there any kind of unexpected results or benefits that you've achieved that when you first started you weren't really quite expecting?
Okay. We first started these projects in late 2011, and we only had a couple of months of 2011 where we really had anything in place. 2012 was our first real full year of operations with two of our partners, Whirlpool and Convermex. And then in about mid-2012, we added Werner. And so as far as what we did in 2012, we ended 2012 with a little over $1 million in benefits for Dal-Tile relative to the cost reductions that were a part of this collaborative opportunity. And one of our focuses from the very beginning has been transparency and sharing benefits. So we have tried. We've made a very valiant effort in making sure that our benefits were shared 50-50 with our collaborative partner. And as a result, if we saved nearly $1 million, or a little over $1 million in 2012, I suspect between our three partners, they would find very similar benefits. So there's really, whatever we save at Dal-Tile, there's twice that in the grand scheme of things as far as savings. In addition to the financial benefits, there's considerable carbon footprint reduction here when you look at combining truckloads and the impact that has. So I think we figured if we, between the three initial partners, if we do what we expect to do on an annual basis, we would reduce diesel fuel consumption by about 500,000 gallons a year with those three projects, which I think is pretty substantial just for 3 or 4 lanes to be able to do such a thing. For 2013, we really want to step it up, and we expect to be able to put $3 million worth of savings on the bottom line this year as a result of the collaborative opportunity. And long term, we think that our network, that $175 million spend that we have, we think that there's $6 to $8 million of plant to RDC benefits that can be derived through the application of this methodology. Obviously, you can't do it all. There's always going to be some piece of your business that just doesn't apply to this methodology, whether it be due to difficult to load SKUs or lack of volume in particular lanes, whatever. But we think that there's $6 to $8 million a year in benefits available if we really go after it. So again, doubling that, saying that there would be similar benefits for our partners. We expect there would be $6 to $8 million in this for our partners as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's I think just the scope of the program and the type of benefits you described. I think it's clear why you guys the entire team received the CSCMP Supply Chain Innovation Award last year. So congratulations on that. Sonney, I'm going to ask you the last question, and Ben, you can add to Sonney's response. And really, it's about advice for other shippers interested in exploring collaborative shipping opportunities. What were some of your lessons learned? What recommendations would you make to other shippers that are looking to put a program together similar to the one that we just talked about today? So, Sonney, why don't you go first, and then Ben can add his perspective as well.
Okay. I think it's really important that you understand the appeal of whatever your collaborative opportunity really is, because you can't really get hooked up with your partners or find the right partner. You're never going to be able to reap the benefits that you have in mind or that you think you found. So you've got to understand the appeal that your process or that your collaborative opportunity is going to have to partners, and be able to, I think, illustrate to them how they're going to benefit. Nobody has time to waste on ideas that aren't going to yield a benefit somewhere along the way. So you've got to keep that in mind. The other part of this is, how complex is the opportunity or the change that you had in mind. And in our case, it really turned out, while it seems to be very simple in concept, there's a lot of intricacies in working with a collaborative partner and with a facilitator. So it really is much more complex than what you would think it would be in the beginning, but you find a way through all of these things. I think you have to think about, can you support the processes internally? Can you support the processes that are going to be required to be able to work with the partner? Can you stay in sync with one another? Can you communicate frequently enough that you don't get out of sync? Are you going to need help to be able to do that? And in some cases, that's another role that Transplace has taken on, is being that communicator in the middle that kind of keeps everybody synced up, at least on a volume basis, so that we're not making mistakes on a daily basis relative to what we thought we were going to be able to do versus what we can do. So just being able to stay in sync is awfully important. I'll make one other comment about the whole concept. I liken it to if you're in a private operation, you're really the captain of the ship. You've got control over your volumes, how you move them, the modes, all the things that go into the making the decisions that you make in a transportation operation. I think you have to look at it on the collaboration perspective as being a co-captain and being able to let somebody else take the wheel to some degree and be able to drive the ship. Because you have to make joint decisions on these lanes that you're collaborating on. It's not just your decisions that drive the ship at that point in time. And you have to be able to be comfortable with a co-captain role rather than the captain role.
Great point, Sonney. I think those are all valid recommendations, and I think that last point in particular, I think it goes back to kind of the points we talked about earlier in terms of some of the skepticisms that shippers have, and then how do you actually overcome some of the roadblocks that folks might have when it comes time to actually put collaboration into practice. And I think that last point really kind of spoke to that. Ben, anything you want to add to that in terms of from your perspective in terms of working on this project as well as other collaborative projects you've worked on? What are some of the recommendations that you would give to folks that other shippers that might be interested in the projects?
Sure. I think Sonney already touched base in on the most important ones, but I would like to add that it is also extremely important that if it could be any type of collaboration project, it could be dedicated fleets, it could be a number of different projects. But if you're working with another company, I think the most important part is to treat your partner as a partner, and not think that you're sitting in front of a vendor, because that's not the case. If you don't have that mindset of partnership, the project is not going to be successful. And I think that's an important point for this type for any collaboration project.
Great point. And we're coming up here almost at the a little over 40 minutes. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up now. But really, again, I want to congratulate you both, as well as your other members of the team, for winning the award last year. I think it's a great case study. I think it is a great example to those that are other shippers that are looking to explore collaborative transportation, to kind of showcase a path forward, if you will, a framework on how to make it work, and the type of benefits that are possible in really thinking and really adopting a collaborative framework. So again, congratulations, and thank you both for being on the program.
Thank you,
Adrian.
And for the rest of you attending today, thank you very much as well for attending. Just want to just remind you all that we're going to be on every Thursday at 12 o'clock Eastern. So hopefully you'll be able to go ahead and mark your calendars and see who we have on every week. Most weeks we'll have great guests like we had today with Ben and Sonney. Other times it just might be me talking about some industry trends or things that are happening in the industry. But either way, the goal is to really help educate the market, start a conversation around some of these things going out there, and hopefully you'll be able to join in the conversation. So again, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Ben and Sonney, and we look forward to seeing you all in a future edition of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.